So thank you, Gila. So we're up to chapter 11.
Yes.
Chapter 11 in 13 Petalled Rose, the chapter about prayer. We are delving into not just which prayers to recite, but more importantly, what is prayer? And Rabbi Steinsaltz here has already given so many insights. Some, just to summarize very quickly, some include first and foremost the idea that prayer in Hebrew is tefillah. Tefillah in Hebrew does not mean prayer. It means connection. Because prayer connotes two separate human beings or entities interacting with one another. Connection is two entities coming together as one. That's really what happens in prayer. We come together as one with God himself. The climax of prayer is the Amidah. That was one big idea, and we can speak about this a lot. The other idea is that prayer really, this is what we delved in last time, and that is that prayer really includes two almost opposite elements. Element number one is the emphasis on individuality. Element number two is the emphasis on community. In prayer, we come as individuals to speak our own personal hearts and what is on it, but we also come together with the community to emphasize this idea that we are not just living as individuals, but we are living as collective beings that are intrinsically connected to the community. This is rooted in the two opinions of the Talmud. Then we can continue on, but the two opinions of the Talmud about where does prayer come from? What is the origin of prayer? One opinion says that the origin of prayer is really the forefathers who instituted the three prayers that we have: the morning prayer, the afternoon prayer, and the evening prayer. Abraham instituted the morning prayer, Isaac the afternoon prayer, and Jacob the evening prayer. The other opinion of the Talmud is that no, the origin of prayer is not in our forefathers, but rather is in the temple. Today, we don't have a temple and we can't bring sacrifices. To substitute sacrifices, we pray. Now, there is no conclusion in the Talmud of who is right and who is wrong. Both are right. But what are they really arguing about? They're arguing about what is prayer. One opinion says that prayer is a very personal act. It's an act of complete ecstasy, of me conversing with God. And that's the opinion that says that prayer originates in the forefathers, because when they instituted the prayer, it was a very personal, very spontaneous act, right? For example, when it says that Isaac instituted the afternoon prayer, it says, Vayetze Yitzchak lasuach b'sadeh. Isaac went out to converse with God in the field. Just imagine the moment of meditation, of ecstasy, but it's a very personal one. So that's one side of the argument. The other side of the argument is that no, prayer is a collective act, just like sacrifices. You have to bring a sacrifice in the temple with the public, with the community, because that's what prayer is. It's a community act. And that's why, by the way, prayer should be really recited. I mean, it doesn't have to, and you still have to pray if you're not with the community, but it should be recited with a minyan. And there are advantages to that too. A prayer with the minyan, a prayer with the community cannot be refused by God. A prayer by an individual can be refused by God. Again, emphasizing this idea that prayer is also a community act. So there are two sides to prayer, and both are crucially needed. And this is really what Rabbi Steinsaltz was speaking about last time we studied this. But let's continue with this idea of prayer, including both the individual element and the collective element, by continuing here with what you said, right, Gila, with these words in actuality. It's in the middle of page 131. Does anyone want to read?
I'll read.
Please.
In reality, these two modes are not necessarily that starkly different. They even overlap. Sometimes a person stands in a congregation, but he prays as though alone. At other times, a number of individuals praying by themselves are connected on a soul level, and so create a unified community.
Right. And so they're not necessarily opposing one another. They come together as one, both opinions. But I want to delve into this. And I think that the key here, Steinsaltz is so careful with these words, and every word I think has so much meaning. But the key here is to understand what he means here with the words you just read. Praying by themselves are connected on a soul level. What is he referring to? What does it mean to be connected on a soul level? And what this really refers to is this big Kabbalistic idea. And that is that, in fact, we are all part of one single entity. That's the entity of the collective soul of the Jewish people. The collective soul is a soul in which there are many, many different parts to it. According to the Kabbalah, there are 600,000 parts to it. Now, every single one of us carries a little bit of that soul. When we come together, we recreate that collective soul. That the Tanya, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi speaks quite a bit about this, especially in chapter 32, if you want to look further into this. But it says that when we are commanded to love one another, what does it mean to love your fellow as yourself? Well, the only way we can achieve that type of love is when we can see the other as an intrinsic part of me. Because my soul, together with someone else's soul, and together yet with someone else also, when we come together, then we recreate the soul. If we divorce ourselves from one another, then we are divorcing really the collective soul that we are speaking about. So we are each part of the same whole. And I think this is what Rabbi Steinsaltz means, that when we come together to pray, we are in a way recreating or recomposing this collective soul. There's, to put it maybe in a different way, but there's a great piece from the Jerusalem Talmud that speaks about this oneness that really is expressed by us coming together. But the Talmud speaks about how if one person is slicing a piece of meat, I don't know if anyone here is a good slicer of meat, but if anyone is slicing a piece of meat, and I guess it's not talking about a good slicer of meat, because someone is slicing a piece of meat and by mistake he's slicing it with the right hand, and his right hand slices instead his left hand instead of the piece of meat. It happens. Sometimes you slip. So the question at the Jerusalem Talmud is, should the left hand now take its revenge and slice the right hand because the right hand caused such harm to it? Obviously not. Why? It's part of one body. Same with us. If we harm someone else, we're really harming ourselves. Even if we have all the justifications to do so. Oh, that person harmed me, I should harm that person back. But no, we're one. We're one. We're harming ourselves by doing so. And this speaks to yet to a further idea, that the world is only complete if everyone fulfills his or her own mission. It's almost like a symphony, and we've used this example many times. If every instrument plays according to what it is supposed to do, the trumpet is a trumpet, and piano is a piano, and a drum is a drum, or whatever it is, then we can have a symphony. Otherwise, we're really not just harming ourselves. If I'm a trumpet and I'm not playing like a trumpet, then I'm harming the entire symphony. And that's really what this collective whole means. That we are one, and if we have to act as one. Acting as one also means to come and pray as one. Now, this also maybe explains why God accepts the prayer of the collective and not necessarily the prayer of the individual. Because when God sees that oneness, how can he not respond? How can he not say, yes, I'll fulfill? It's almost like parents coming with seeing their children united and then coming as one. How can you not say yes? How can you not respond in a positive way? Because of that unity. That unity really is what enables us to be us in the fullest sense of the term. So that's really the big idea, and I think this is why praying by themselves are connected on the soul level. We are connected on the soul level, and communal prayer demands of us to not only see that connection, but also to live it. That's the big idea. Yes, Dan.
So what does that mean with respect to something simple that it's to say the Shema when they go to bed and when they wake up in the morning? That's a singular type of thing. So
Right.
Does that conflict with the thought?
Right. So going back to the symphony example, that's an excellent question. Teaching your kid to say the Shema is teaching the trumpet player to play the trumpet. Now, he says the Shema in his own way, and I'll say the Shema in my own way, and I'll connect to God in my way, and the other person will my child will connect to God in a different way. But Shema is a way of connection to God. And again, the how you connect is different. The what you use to connect is the same for everybody. But the how you connect is different. The what, by the way, I said is the same for everybody, but by the way, Rabbi Steinsaltz was also big into this, and in fact, he composed his own prayers too, but he would tell us to compose our own prayers. So besides the Shema, we can add our own prayers to God. In fact, Jewish law tells you that if you have personal prayers that are temporary, some should be permanent. And that's what Rabbi Steinsaltz would tell us to do, to compose our own permanent prayers. He did so, and not too long ago, after his death, we discovered a prayer that he composed when he was just about 20, which is one of the most, I don't know, there's a word, beautiful, one of the most soulful prayers you'll ever read. And one of the wisest prayers you'll ever read. And I'm happy to share this with the group, and I'll send it to you, and we can share it with everyone. But in addition to the Shemas and the other prayers, the individual prayers, and I was saying Jewish law also dedicates the moment in the prayer in which we are encouraged to recite our own individual prayers. And that is in Amidah, in the daily Amidah, which is considered again the most intimate prayer with God. We have a blessing. There are 19 blessings. One of the blessings is called Shema Koleinu, which means hear our voice, hear our call. And before concluding that prayer, which concludes with Baruch Atah Hashem Shema Tefillah, we're encouraged by Jewish law, by the Talmudic sages too, to insert our own individual prayers there, if we should have any. Whether it's praise for health or for livelihood. And by the way, this touches upon, and not that he speaks about this here, but Rabbi Steinsaltz would often say that, don't think that your prayer is too small. Because after all, we're speaking about an infinite God. And from the viewpoint of infinity, big prayers and small prayers look exactly the same. So if you're asking for a candy, if a child is asking for a candy, there's not much difference between a child asking for a candy and me asking for good health. Or you can say, oh, good health is so much more important. But from the viewpoint in infinity, both prayers are on the same level. They're both finite. They both are swallowed in infinity. So no prayer is too small. So in that Shema Koleinu, you can pray about anything. You might say, oh, it's too small. You know, it's like the story about this very wealthy guy who comes to the Western Wall and he wants to pray, but there's a beggar right next to him asking God, please, I need 100 shekels, I need 100 shekels, I need 100 shekels. So the wealthy man takes out 100 shekels from his pocket. He says, yeah, just take it. I need God's undivided attention. So from a viewpoint infinity, God can listen to everybody, he can listen to all requests. From a viewpoint infinity, the beggar and the wealthy man is on the same level, and so on and so forth. So that's just another thing to keep in mind.
And the beggar got his prayer answered so quickly.
Sorry?
The beggar got his prayer
answered so quickly. There you go.
Yeah.
Yes, Gary, please.
So my question is, so I understand the whole idea of a minion, and God cannot refuse prayer from a minion. What are the circumstances that an individual's prayer could be rejected by God, and how does that manifest itself, and what does that mean?
Right. So that's a great question. First of all, you know, there's that Talmudic line that says, Rachmana libabai, God wants the heart. If it's a prayer that comes without a heart, in Kabbalistic terms, let's go to the words of Kabbalah. So we say that the heart produces wings to our prayers. When we speak with the heart to God, then prayers fly go all the way up to the throne of glory, and God listens to our prayers. Does he answer them? Does he fulfill them? That's a different question. But they are heard by God. So that's why every prayer really should be said with the heart. We should mean it. If we say it robotically, then even though Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev, but that's to add some pepper to this, all right, some paprika to this. But Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev was once asked, how did you become such a great advocate for the Jewish people? He said, it's a lesson someone praying taught me. Because Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev was one of the great advocates of the Jewish people. He would always find the good things in people. And he would also speak of the Jewish people and of people in general in the best ways possible, even if those people didn't deserve to be spoken in the best ways possible. But how did he become such a great advocate? Rabbi Levi Yitzchak Berdichev became such a great advocate for humanity altogether was because one day he was praying, and then he sees someone in the minyan. He sees someone speaking, like praying very quickly. And someone complains is that we pray sometimes too quickly. Well, listen to this. Listen to this story. Praying someone very quickly and almost robotically. So he went to that person and he says, how can you be praying like this? And that person responded, I'm speaking to my father. And a true father understands every language of his children. He's that taught him a lesson, and that's when he said, okay, I'm only speaking positively about my people. But so you do have prayers that might not come from the heart, but the Father listens to all languages. But going back to the question, to your question there, so it needs to be said with the heart. Number two, our prayers sometimes are recited because from a very narrow viewpoint. So I'm sure you can all look back at your lives and say, well, oh, I thought that when I was 18, I needed this. Thank God I didn't get this when I was 18, because it was the wrong thing for me. But so why did I think about it when I was 18? Because I looked at life from a very narrow viewpoint. God, thank God, sees everything, sees our entirety of being. He doesn't see us from the age of 18. He sees us from our entire lives. And he might say, well, I'm sorry. You might think you need it. You don't need it right now. And then in hindsight, it's really the best service to not receive it. But so sometimes it's from that perspective. And third, some prayers are refused, not because we don't need them, not because they're not said from the heart, but some people are refused because, and that's part of what we can't understand, because that was God's decision. One of the most heart-wrenching Talmudic passages from the Midrash speaks about Moses being shown the future, and God takes him before he dies. Rashi says, and the Midrash says, that God showed him the entire future. He, by the way, showed Moses our generation, which is the generation that we believe, as many greats have said, including the Baba Rebbe, that this is the generation before the coming of Mashiach. We hopefully will experience the coming of Mashiach today. But when Moses saw our generation, his face changed colors. God asked him, what happened? Why are you becoming all red and green and blue? And Moshe said, because if I would be living in that generation, I, Moses, would not be able to withstand the test that they are withstanding. So that, by the way, you can pat yourselves on your shoulders. That you might be on a higher level than Moses if you're withstanding all the tests. But in any case, but he also showed him Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was, as we know, one of the great leaders in Jewish history who faced almost single-handedly rebuilt the Jewish world after the great destruction of the temple and destruction by the Romans. And when Moses was shown Rabbi Akiva, he was taken to a class of Rabbi Akiva teaching Torah. And Rabbi Akiva was teaching things that Moses himself could not understand. And Moses also became embarrassed until some student, again in the future, raised his hand and asked Rabbi Akiva, he's sitting in the class. Moses is sitting, the student is asking Rabbi Akiva, where do you know this from? Rabbi Akiva said, Halakha Moshe Sinai. This is what Moses taught us on the Mount Sinai. So Moses became a little relieved. But he was so impressed by this Torah that he asked God, wow, this great rabbi is teaching such Torah. What is its reward? So God says, come, let's fast forward to his death. And Moses witnessed how Rabbi Akiva was being tortured to death by a Roman. Rabbi Akiva died on Yom Kippur. He was tortured to death just for being Jewish, for teaching Torah, for being a leader, by having his skin shaved from his toe to his head. And Moses was so disturbed, he asked God, Zu Torah v'zu schara, this is the Torah that he teaches and this is its reward. And God responded, Shtok kach alav ha'machshava. Keep quiet, these are my thoughts, not yours. And so I'm saying sometimes there are prayers that are refused and we don't know why. We just don't know. God is in a different realm and we don't know why. But that's the third
I'm
type of
sorry,
refusal.
keep quiet. These are my thoughts, not yours. How arrogant.
Yeah,
Well, it's God.
yeah, well, it's God,
You know, Rabbi.
right, yeah.
Not to interrupt, my husband just
Yeah,
said, but I
yeah.
just listened to your podcast.
Yeah.
On arrogance.
Yeah,
Fits beautifully, but
yeah.
so, yes, please respond, but I just want you to.
No, that's right. So please respond yourself.
No, I mean, so this
Yeah.
is very confusing.
Yeah.
Rabbi Allouche, in his wonderful podcast that all guys have to listen to, said arrogance is, there is no room for God to be with someone who is arrogant. There's just no place. You can't be in the same room.
Right.
So is it something other than arrogance? God is not a duality. God is a singularity, right? God is achad.
Right, exactly. And more than arrogance, I don't know if it's arrogance, but I think it's God saying that, there is a limit to how much the finite being can understand me, the infinite being. And, we say that Isaiah has a verse like that. It's a verse that we recite every fast day. My thoughts are not your thoughts, my ways are not my ways, states God. That's the speech of God, the declaration of God. And what God is saying is that at the end of the day, I'm the creator, I'm the master of the universe. And I run my universe the way I think I need to run my universe. You're just a soldier in this universe. And we have to accept that.
But we also need to, we beg God, Abba.
Yeah.
The song by.
Right.
Abba,
Right,
you are our father.
right,
We implore you.
Yeah.
We beg of you.
Yeah.
We can't stop doing that. It's very harsh. And I
absolutely.
think a lot of people, I know for myself as well.
Yeah.
God, are you serious?
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you
Right.
respond to that?
No, that's a very good point. So look, I would say let's expand this conversation a little. And I would say there are three roles that we have to play. And three roles that human beings in general have towards God. And in a way, these three roles are also expressed in prayer. There is the role of us as slaves, and God is the master, and we're slaves, and we're subdued. By the way, Islam celebrates this role. That's what Islam means. Subdue yourself to God. And that sometimes is a role we have to play where we say, you know what? That's God's thoughts. Nothing we can do about it. Then there's the role of, as you just mentioned, of us being God's children and he being. So God can be influenced by us children, just like parents can be influenced by their children too. But at the end of the day, there's an authority, and the authority sometimes just slams the hammer, and that's what it is. But then there's a third role, and I think that's the unique Jewish view too. And that is that we are not slaves, we are not children, we are partners. Right? The word for mitzvah does not just mean good deed. It's actually a mistranslation. It doesn't mean good deed at all. Mitzvah mean one of two things. Either commandment, comes from the word tzivui, to command, or it comes from the word tzavta, or tzevet in Hebrew. Tzevet means unit. Tzavta in Hebrew also means connection, or partnership. That's what it means. Because when we're doing a mitzvah, we're partnering with God in bettering this world. That's what a mitzvah eventually does. So there is a role that we do fill as partners of God. Now, if you really are a partner of God, and that means not that you do a mitzvah randomly. I really despise that term. I know we use it, we overuse it. Of random, let's engage in random act of kindness. Why do we have to put the word random there? Let's engage in acts of kindness, or better, let's engage in consistent acts of kindness. Random acts of kindness, once in a blue moon, I'll be kind. Oh, very good. But that doesn't make you you. What makes you you is your consistent actions. So we should engage in consistent actions of kindness. Really, that should be the right term. We should change American society by changing that term. But if we are consistently engaging in mitzvot, then we have the right to see ourselves as partners of God. And then we have the right, just like a good business partner, to say to God, this is wrong. I'm trying to do my job here in bettering the world. You just messed it up for me, God. So stop. Then we have the right indeed to say, no, this is wrong. I don't care what your thoughts are, God. We're in this together. I thought we were in this together. So let's change things around. But again, then you have to not just say that you're a partner, you have to actually do that partnership on a consistent basis. Yes, Ariel.
In reading the Psalms.
Yeah.
I'm very taken by the fact that it seems that King David prayed with a sense of expecting God to answer his prayers,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm I've never looked at it that way before.
But it's true. Well, he was a true partner too. Now, that's why also the Talmud will tell us, there's a great statement that Tzaddik gozer v'kadosh baruch hu mekayem, that a righteous man decrees and God has to follow through. God has to go according to the decree of the righteous. Why? Because they're true partners. So when a partner decrees, like in business, if I have a business partner and I did something wrong, I messed it up. My business partner has the right to take the lead and say, I'm doing it this way now. That also explains why many of the righteous perform so-called miracles. They weren't performing what they weren't performing necessarily miracles. We can call them miracles, but what they were performing is their side of their partnership. That's what they were doing. So I was saying to God, I'm sorry, this is wrong. This child is sick. I'm going to give him a blessing for healing. It's wrong. Now, yes, God also has the veto on those decrees, even towards the righteous. So he could say, I'm sorry, that's not happening. I know that Rabbi Steinsaltz's son, I'm very close to Rabbi Even-Israel, had leukemia when he was 16 years old. And he suffered tremendously. And the doctor said, that's it. You're not going to survive this. Well, he went to experts, you're not going to survive this. Rabbi Steinsaltz was very close to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. In fact, you have a picture here with him and the Lubavitcher Rebbe on the left side. But he went to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe said, "Refuah Shlema, don't worry, he'll heal." Now, when he laid in the hospital, there was a child, a classmate of his, that's ironic, this is classmate of many, who had the exact same type of leukemia. And he was in the exact same state. And he asked the Rebbe for a blessing, and the Rebbe avoided him. And he sent his uncle, the Rebbe avoided his uncle. Many Even-Israel eventually healed. Thank God, doctor said he's not going to be able to have children. Today he has many children. So thank God he healed completely. That other classmate died. Almost as if the Rebbe saw, that's not something I can change. It's a decree that's beyond me. Sometimes God, when we are partners, we have the power to decree, and God has to follow the decree, but God keeps the right of veto. Yes.
Concept of laying of hands is a Christian concept. The way you just described it, if the person was truly a tzaddik, a righteous person, then the concept may not be so alien.
What concept?
Laying
Laying of hands. Yes, that's right. Look, and I think that the righteous understand more than we do that their power is also limited from that standpoint. And I understand sometimes, I'm just going to throw it out there, but there could be 1,001 reasons, even more. But sometimes souls are sent to this world for a very limited amount of time. They are reincarnated and they need to come just for a limited amount of time. And maybe the Lubavitcher Rebbe understood that about Yossi Katan, who was the classmate of many. But there could be, again, myriads of other reasons. And I understand that sometimes, God has a veto for his own reasons that we can't understand. Those are his thoughts, not ours.
Rabbi,
Yes.
this is Joyce here.
Yes. Hi, Joyce. Good to see you.
I've missed being together.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well, today's a new day. Now you're together, and that's what counts.
yeah. Something came to me, and I wrote it down when you talked about Rabbi Akiva. I know we've gone on a little bit, and I just wrote Rabbi Akiva tortured Yom Kippur and so forth. And we were talking about, how God could let that. But I'm thinking to myself, but here we are talking about the story, talking about what happened.
Right.
And I don't know how to say it all, but with me with stories, there's a sense that we have to keep telling the story. God wants us to keep telling the story that Rabbi Akiva, I don't know if this is the right word, sacrifice for something bigger, that God wants us to continue to look at.
Right,
throughout the generations.
right.
And I don't know if I'm saying that right or not, but
No, you're saying it
keeps-
yeah, you're
it
saying it,
keeps coming to me,
right,
the importance of a misdeed, a hurt,
right,
how we can continue to look at it, and maybe God wants us to turn it into a way
right.
to bring light into the world.
Right,
to be
absolutely.
just.
And in a way, right, in a way, it's connected to that which we said before. We look at things from a very personal and narrow-minded standpoint, right? This story, Rabbi Akiva, Moses is taken into the future, but he
Yeah.
doesn't see the future after that future. He doesn't see that when he's asking the question, Zu Torah v'zu schara, is this the Torah and this is its reward? He doesn't see. At least as of yet. Only afterwards, God continued to take him into the future. But at the moment of the question, maybe he didn't see the aftermath of Rabbi Akiva's death and of how he truly continued to live, even after he physically died. Maybe then his question would have been different too. Who knows? I'm just suggesting that. But you're right. You're right. And you never know. Look, I heard this from Racheli Frankel too. Racheli Frankel, whose son is on the memorial right here.
Yes.
His son was one of the 3 boys who were kidnapped in the summer of 2014 in Israel and later found dead 3 weeks later in some field outside of Hebron, murdered by this evil terrorist. By the way, when they were kidnapped, one of the boys turned on his phone to call the police and so wisely left it open. And you hear the terrorist telling the 3 boys, Togidu tagosh, lower your heads, lower your heads. And the response of the Jewish people was to raise our heads up high. And that was one of the most beautiful responses we can have. But speaking about responses to evil, and Racheli Frankel saw how the death of a child really brought so much life to a nation and changed so many lives, then in a way that for her, she's told me that this is a source of comfort. That we think from our narrow standpoint that, okay, my son is gone, and she thinks from my son is gone, and it's a tragedy and it remains an eternal tragedy. But on the other hand, expanding that standpoint shows also all the beauty and all the life that comes thereafter, and that in of itself deserves attention and praise. Yeah, yes,
I was just
Benjamin.
thinking about something, because I was in Israel this past summer.
Yeah.
And I was on a birthright trip with a lot of people who hadn't been to Israel, I've been before.
Uh-huh.
But when we visited Masada, for example.
Yeah.
A lot of people, you go up there, hear what's
Right.
happened there. Sometimes maybe there is a reason in terms of what future generations are going to think about in terms of what people sacrificed in essence while they were up there.
Right, very good. That's right. Masada is a great example to that, and fortunately or fortunately, we have many other examples to that in Jewish history. Yeah. Okay. Anyhow, so that's going back to the power of the whole. That the power of the whole of the prayer with the minyan, with the collective, really ascends all the way to the throne of glory, because we're really reflecting the wholesomeness of our people by joining each other with one another. Now, again, some prayers can be refused or not, and that's where we kind of went. I will say this, speaking of individual prayers that are refused, or individual prayers sometimes that are said without a heart. The question is, right? The question might have come to your mind. So if I have no heart right now, I'm not inspired to pray. Should I still pray? I'm going to pray without a heart. So the answer is, of course, definitely pray. First, because we have Rabbi Levi Berditchev's story. God understands every language. But also, as Rabbi Steinsaltz would put it so brilliantly, he would say, okay, so that prayer maybe is reflected best by a 0. No, it's worth 0. Then you have another prayer like that, another 0. And then you have another prayer like that, another 0. But then you have one prayer with a full heart, and that's considered one good prayer. That one good prayer adds a 1 to all the zeros. Now, instead of having 1, you have 1,000 prayers. Yeah, that's how you would put it. I've heard him say that many times. Yeah. Anyhow, let's continue. Bottom of page, unless there's other comments or disagreements. Bottom of page 131. Please. institutionalization of prayer. Oh my gosh. You don't have to read that. Let's go to the, yeah. Bottom of page 131. Does anyone want to read?
Okay.
Anyway, please, Gila, go for it.
These also the institutionalization of.
Thank you.
I-
Thank you.
I-
Thank you.
Twitter,
Thank
I'm-
you.
I'm
Thank you.
concerned about it.
Thank you. Good.
These two perspectives are the expression of a yet deeper divide between prayer as defined by the Torah as worship of the heart and the structure of prayer as it exists today, between the frameworks constructed by our sages over the course of centuries and the personal frameworks people create for themselves. In the early generations, every individual prayed according to the urgings of his heart, speaking his own words as best he could and whenever he wished to do so. Only after the destruction of the first temple, when a certain alienation from Judaism developed, as reflected in the fact that people found it hard to express themselves in prayer, did the members of the Great Assembly formulate the set prayer services.
Mhm. Maybe one more.
These services are of a communal nature. The core prayer, the Shemona Esrei, contains many requests for blessings that not every individual needs at every moment.
Right. Okay, so I think, and then we'll continue, but I think this big idea of prayer being institutionalized is based or is founded on this notion that is spoken about a lot in Jewish literature and the Talmud and in many other places in Kabbalah too. This notion is called Yeridat Hadorot, the descent of generations, the spiritual descent that occurs from generation to generation. The Talmud says famously, Im Rishonim ke Malachim, Anachnu ki Bnei Adam. The first generations were like angels, we're just like human beings. Im Rishonim ki Bnei Adam, if the first generations are like human beings, Anachnu kachamorim, velo kachamoro shel Pinchas ben Yair. If the first generations are like human beings, we are like donkeys. And not like the donkey of Pinchas ben Yair, a Tanaic sage who could speak, a donkey who actually could speak, a donkey that was spiritually refined, not like that donkey, or even worse. But there's a spiritual descent experience from generation to generation. In fact, that's the great story with, I think it was Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, one of the great halachic authorities of our generation, possibly some 30 years ago, maybe even more. But he was once on a plane with some students, and he was seated right next to an atheist, a professor who also had some students. And the students of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein would come and visit him almost every 10 minutes and ask him, do you need anything? Can we help you with anything? And the students of that professor would come once. So at the end of the ride, this professor comes to Rabbi Moshe Feinstein and says, you got to tell me what your secret is. You have your students and they respect you so much and they come and ask you every 10 minutes what you need. And my students didn't come once. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein says, I'll tell you, it's very simple. See, we believe that we were created by God. God created Adam and Eve, and from Adam and Eve came the rest of humanity. So the closer we are to that generation of Adam and Eve, the closer we are to God. I'm older than them, so I am closer to God, and therefore more divine than them, and they respect my divinity. You believe that you were created from an ape. So the further you move from an ape, the more human being you are. So they believe that they're higher on a higher level than you are. And therefore they don't respect you. but that was his answer. But in a way, that's what the concept of Yeridat Hadorot is. That this descent, there's less and less connection or divine connection, or at least divine manifestation in the world. And therefore there's a descent experience, Yeridat Hadorot. Now, because this affects a lot of things. But one of the things that affects is prayer or our connection to God. And really, prayer means connection, so it affects that connection to God. Now, back in the day, when people were divine, they felt that connection. They would pray to God all the time. After the destruction of the temple, which signified yet another descent of in the spiritual level of humanity altogether, when we were exiled, then we had less of that connection, and therefore we prayed less. The sages, noticing that, said, oh gosh, people are going to lose their connection with God. We're going to maintain that essential connection, which is first and foremost expressed through prayer, through tefillah. So let's institutionalize prayer. And that's why we have prayers 3 times a day. And that's why prayers came to substitute sacrifices. They weren't anymore, to continue to ensure the maintenance and the perseverance of that connection. So that's the general idea of Yeridat Hadorot. Now, by the way, this also explains why, if you think about this, but the prayer book, if you've ever researched that, the prayer book has swelled over the many generations. In the times after the temple, the prayer book was very thin, maybe 10 pages long. And then slowly but surely it continued to swell and swell and swell. More and more prayers were included. The Kabbalists added a ton. And then even now we've added more prayers. Some prayers are pretty recent, maybe 100 years old, because in a way, every generation is trying to reaffirm that connection, sensing the spiritual descent that every generation is experiencing. So maybe that explains also the swelling of the Siddur, of the prayer book. But that's really the idea. So they came to substitute the sacrifices, but not just the sacrifices. They came to maintain the connection that we experience while sacrificing sacrifices in the temple. That's really that's the big idea. But please speak your minds, or
Rabbi?
yes, please.
Yeah, I just had a thought. I don't know if this is relevant or not. But when you just said that about the swelling, I wonder, I don't know why I just thought of this, but I wonder when the children are in school, and they are studying the Siddur, could that be some kind of, I want to say not an assignment, that's a technical word, but an assignment for their own Siddur to add their prayer. Part of their teaching would be having their Siddur swell, so to speak, to add one prayer.
Right.
And, it just came into my mind when you said,
right.
I saw these children's hands and holding a Siddur and like swelling.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So look, I commend all these Jewish schools. I'm sure you've all been to Siddur parties. First grade, maybe you yourselves have had, but there are Siddur parties where we celebrate children and their Siddur, the Siddur that they get, and yes, in a Jewish education, in fact, there's quite a clear roadmap as to how to teach kids prayer. So you start with the most essential prayers, like the Shema, for example, or the morning prayers, the Modani when you wake up, which is an essential prayer. And slowly but surely you add to that. But speaking of adding, again, I must also remind everyone and myself that Rabbi Steinsaltz wanted us to write our own prayers, so we can add. And there's nothing wrong with the swelling of the Siddur. I'm not saying that there's something wrong about it. I'm just saying that it's reflective of the spiritual descent. But our personal prayers can certainly be added to it. That will swell the Siddur a little bit more. So what? It will enhance our connection. And that's really the end goal. Yeah. I'll say this, it's interesting because in a way, what has happened with the spiritual descent explains the name for the prayer book that we have. What's the name? Siddur. What does Siddur mean in Hebrew? Organized, structure, lesadeh. And then in a way, it's because they wanted to, as Rabbi Steinsaltz calls it, institutionalize the prayer or structurize the prayer, right? Give some organization to the prayer to maintain that connection. And everyone can come in and fill the content, fill the soul. But that's why we call it Siddur. Siddur referring to the institutionalization of prayer. Excuse me. But that's what Siddur means. Just amazing.